Hello and welcome to Sports Hub. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Morden Tapechela Sinkala Umwana Wakwiranzi, and happy Farmers Day if you are a farmer out there. I am a farmer, but not a commercial farmer, but I do some farming, so I think I'm part of that group. So today we are going the administrative way. So I'm featuring a sports administrator who has a doctorate. So stay with us so that we find out who this doctor in sports is. So feel free to participate on the program by calling 0211 25 30 25, also 0211 25 08 43. You can also send a WhatsApp message on 0955 20 29 04. On social media, in terms of Facebook, you can go to Modern Sinkala Sports or Sports Hub Facebook page. Then on the segment we call How Much Do You Know Your Sportsmen and Women? Last week I asked you to identify a sportsman on the photo, and I got some interesting answers. So let's see the answers that came through. Actually, not that one. That one is, yes, that's the photo. So the previous one, we used it the other week, David Siame. So that's the one, that's the answer there, Boniface Simutowe. So the answers that I got, so the first one is from Charles Mushaukwa from Kabwe, who says, hi presenter, that's Akim Simulambo. So it was a combination of names there. Yes, there was Akim, but it's Akim Musenge, who played in the 1974 squad. Then there was also Johnny Simulambo, so he combined the Akim and Simulambo. So unfortunately you got it wrong, Mr. Mshaukwa from Kabwe. Then Prudence Nkonde from Kitwe says, hello Modern, I wanted to identify the player. Boniface Simutowe, born in 1949, Zambian player, midfielder nicknamed Chest Master, first footballer to be named Zambian Footballer of the Year, played for Kabwe Warriors, died in 2014. Correct. Well done, Prudence Nkonde from Kitwe. And she's a lady. I'm surprised that a lady can follow, men's football like that. So well done. I also received a call last week from a man from Luansha. He also said Boniface Simutowe. He got it right. So let's know more about this man, Boniface Simutowe. Who was he? So born on October 13, 1949, Simutowe was one of Zambia's greatest midfielders who also had a long career as a coach. Nicknamed Chest Master and Chitapo Chimo, he was the first footballer to be named Zambian Footballer of the Year and Sportsman of the Year in the same season, and was part of the great Kabwe Warriors side that swept all the silverware on offer in 1972. He later took to coaching and was involved in the national team for several years. He died on December 23, 2014. May his soul rest in peace. That's Boniface Simutowe Chitapo Chimo, Chest Master. Actually, his daughter is a netball player, and she's part of the players that have been called to camp that are preparing to play the World Cup qualifiers in South Africa. This same month, actually, the tournament is starting on the 21st of this month, all the way up to 29th. So that's a Boniface Simutowe. Today, I have a photo of legends. Can you manage to identify them? If you do, you know the number, I'm sure by now, 0211 25 30 25, 0211 25 08 43. Or you can send us a WhatsApp message on 0955 20 29 04. It's a photo of legends. Can you manage to identify those legends who contributed a lot to Zambian football? There are actually three. So I'll be showing you that picture later on. But in other messages, remember last week I hosted a boxer, Gracious Simualizi, and the family was watching, and we received a message from his elder brother, Shadrach Simualizi, who says, that's our last born. We are watching. We are proud of him. So that's him there. He actually sent a photo, a selfie, showing us that he was watching the program and very proud of the young brother, Gracious Simualizi, who is a boxer. Right, so thank you very much, Shadrach Simualizi. So So let's see if the photo is ready. The legends of Zambian football. Who are those 3 legends there? Give us a call or send a WhatsApp message or go to Facebook and answer that question. We'll be waiting. So as you are looking at that photo, let's now look at what happened over the weekend. We start with the Commonwealth Games. Zambians are not performing very well at the Commonwealth Games. We have a rugby team, lost all the games. Swimmers started on a shaky note, but did well as time went by. We saw Jade Piri actually winning one of her heats, but it was not enough to see her progress to the next stage. Tilka, one of those participating, Zach Moyo, and also Kumaren Naidu in swimming. Then Simon Zulu in judo lost just this evening. But in boxing, we saw Patrick Chinyemba winning his fight, and he has advanced to the quarterfinals. We also have squash. Squash players didn't do very well. So we wish them all the best. Tomorrow we should be able to see runners taking to the track, Rod and Jovu, and so forth. So wishing them all the best. From Commonwealth Games, let's go to Chess Olympiads. Zambia causing an upset, beating Egypt, who are actually the favorites. You know, Egypt are the favorites in the world of chess. So congratulations to Zambia for beating Egypt. Let's now look at netball in the Midlands Netball Association Mina Agricultural and Commercial Show Tournament. Green Buffaloes, really, they're unstoppable. So again, they've won this tournament. This time they beat Nkwazi by 41 goals to 36. Green Buffaloes are yet to lose this season. They are unstoppable. Who is going to stop them? We shall wait and see. So for now, they are leading in the league. They are yet to win. They are yet to lose a game, and also tournaments they are sweeping. So all the best to Green Buffaloes. Let's now look at CHAN qualifiers. I'm sure fans are very, very disappointed right now that Zambia has failed to qualify for the tournament. This was after they lost at National Hero Stadium. They lost by a goal to nil at the hands of Mozambique. So Mozambique will now meet Malawi in the second and final round. So it means Zambia will miss the African Nations Championship after qualifying for the 2 previous editions. So it's very sad that Zambia will miss. So people are saying, why is the men's team giving fans BP while the women's team was doing very well at the Africa Women Cup of Nations? So before I introduce my guest in the studio, let's dance to a song done by Chester titled Chimo Nava Zambia.
Pero Silver, more power. The Shago Beat Fest. Uyo, Kalandania News Promotion. More power. Balia wapa sana na lelo tulipamo. Balundo waishi wafuevo kupatana ni tabu. Na kuvundula, unavundula lewo limo. Ala nani kubelela yo. Naliku iwe. Zambia nebo kweli bola ngabalusa tila atafima kula shagata mepo no mafuti ngabakea chipolo nishinda imba ilishinda chipolo nishinda imba ati mufeno mweno wewe kulinewo nebunwa echo yatikatana na mafuti jiakalwepo mwemo nombanga botalana mwana kuru mwanama tubiri tutatumwe Kwali ubushiku ubona ibilatile lo filepwa Naikala balandire seba monefyo filepwa Waluha waleka abalandi bafika Wansagile lilipa mwishine papatawia Amapange ngwata leo Ngana fola lebo kamutana Ngana fola lebo Nkayaleka oti Ndafola Nahula foli datuyema My baby zangela Ala Foso zaka mali zakula Chimuna Zambia ala nebo kweli bola Ngabalusa tila atafima kula shagata mepo No mafuti ngabakea Chipolo nishinda imba ilishinda Cholo kemisuwa yata mafi Cholo ari kujaila Ubusumano bubiwa belela ibushiva Okena kwelela Fionse fibi fionse Iwela ndawa jelela Nechipanda chalishiba Kyaba nififinde Deba kwesho kulanda koka kubilamo Neno wakusana marino bari babili Ichite mwiko chabo awe chakwishiba Bene babili Muna wasambia wala nebo paribola Ngabanu santila Tafima kula shagata mepo Na mafuti nga bakea Nishina imba Ilishinga shinga Nishina imba Alatimu feno mwenwa wewo Kulinewo Nebunwa echo ya jikatana Na mafuti jiakarwepo Mwewo nombanga patarana Wana kuru manama Tumiri tutatumwe Timuna wasambiana Nebo paribola Ngabanu santila Tafima kula shagata mepo Na mafuti nga bakea Nishina imba Ilishinga shinga Nishina imba Alatimu feno mwenwa wewo Kulinewo Nebunwa echo ya jikatana Na mafuti jiakarwepo Mwewo nombanga patarana Wana kuru manama Tumiri tutatumwe Chipolopolo Neluma Chipolopolo Neluma.
Ladies and gentlemen, Silva on the beat.
Nebunwa 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 Nebunwa
Chester there saying Chimona wa Zambia. I'm sure after that game, when Zambia lost to Mozambique by a goal to nil, people are saying, Chapwe nshakatambe pa wa Zambia futi. But when the game comes, they'll be saying, ZNBC ushemleranga game nangushani. So anyway, we are used to that. So time for me to welcome my guest in the studio for today. She started as a trustee for National Organization for Women in Sport, Physical Activity and Recreation, in short, NOWSPAR. She is now the executive director following the passing on of Matilda Mwaba. I'm talking about Lombe Mwamwa, who holds a PhD in sports science and physical education from the University of, well, she'll pronounce it herself. Welcome to Sports Hub Lombe.
Thank you, good to be here.
All right, yes, from the University of what?
Chichester.
Chichester. Yes. All right, thank you very much for coming through. So first of all, give us your background. Who is Lombe Mwamwa? Where is he coming from?
Thank you. Well, that's really difficult to just generally say your background. Well, I was born in Kabwe in the early 80s. My parents, both in education, teaching at the High Ridge Secondary School as well as Caritas. That was my mom, and my dad was in technical education at Kabwe Trades Training Institute. And so I have 7 siblings, sisters and brothers, and numerous cousins, and a very wide family. I also lived in Luansha from around 1995 when we relocated. My parents moved to work there. My father at the Technical and Vocational Teachers College, TVTC, and my mom was teaching at Luansha Boys. So my education has been in public schools at Lukanga Primary School in Kabwe, at Pelembe Primary School in Luansha and Luansha Girls. Then I went to St. Teresa Girls in Chiluvula in Kasama until I completed my my grade 12. Then I came to Lusaka to study at the University of Zambia, and my focus there was development studies and public administration, so a Bachelor of Arts. And I went to University of Zimbabwe at the Southern African Center for Women's Law. So I got a master's degree in women's law. That was around 2009, 2010. And then more recently, the University of Chichester, where I focused on sports science and physical education. My main specialism is sociology of sport, and my particular area of study is on organizational leadership, focusing on women's involvement in sport across the Southern Africa region.
Wow, ladies and gentlemen, very rich CV from Dr. Lombe Mwamwa. I'm always happy when I see women reaching such levels. So now, if we zero into sports, how did you gain interest in sports? Were you very active in sports at school?
Far from it. So when I was in primary school, in fact, I barely did any sport. Anytime I was involved, I was possibly like the last one or couldn't finish races and stuff like that. It was very difficult because, as you know, sport is really competitive, and so unless you have like the skills or capacity or sort of the aptitude for it, then you're not always successful. So in primary school, I was not very successful at sport. So when I was at St. Teresa in Chilubula, it was a requirement that every student must engage in some sport. You must have at least one sport that you're involved with. So I did try out volleyball for a little bit. I was not very successful there because of the physical nature of it. I wasn't very physically fit or active, and I think the coaching methods were not very accommodating for anyone who can't keep up. It was very sort of high performance focused. And you know how secondary school sports and the provincial competitions, the national competitions, so schools are always working hard to have a really strong team. So even though you want all the students in the school to participate, there's still that desire to get really the high performers. So I wasn't very successful there. So I tried badminton as well for a few months. Again, they're looking for the high performers and people who are really good at it, not beginners like me, who are just in it for the fun and not very competitive. And then I moved on to go and play chess. Not many of my colleagues were very interested in it, and I excelled at it. Firstly, because I didn't have to worry about being very physically fit, so I was very successful at that. I even went to a couple of provincial competitions. I made it to the school team. I remember one time we were going off to a competition, and in the school hall they're calling out the list of who's traveling. To represent the school, and my name was called out, and everybody in the hall was just shocked, like, what is she gonna do?
Not sure which sport.
Yeah, like what is she gonna do? Yeah, so that was also really really good. So I did find my niche there. But when I went to university, a friend of mine and I decided, okay, we are part of our tuition fees covers sports fees, and it's compulsory, you have to pay this, but we're not doing any sport. So we must start to do something just because we're paying the fee for it. So just out of wanting to make use of the fees we were paying, we signed up for the volleyball team. Of course, I was still not very good at it, but I showed up every time we had training. So there was really no choice but the team to sort of incorporate me in some way, and yeah, so I ended up in the organizing committee of it, because I was there all the time. They had to find a place for me because, I mean, I'm not exactly going to help win the game, but at least I'm there so I can participate in a different way. So I possibly played a total like 5 minutes of competitive volleyball when I was at Yonsa. But it was really great. I even like traveled with the team to one of the provincial games that was in Southern Province. So I think for me, my involvement in sport has been being interested for one reason or the other, whether it is because it's compulsory or because I feel I have a right and I'm entitled to participate. And so the sports sort of space, you sort of like figure out how you should be involved, because it's not always that you can be the athlete that's competing, because not everybody has that capability.
True. So did you think maybe because you are not competitive, you thought of maybe going into administration, especially after you were given the role of organizing at UNZA?
Not particularly. My involvement with organizing sports was not really from my engagement with sport participating in the volleyball team at the university. So while I was at the university, one of my cousins, we had the opportunity to support Kalusha Bwalia, who had just set up the Kalusha Foundation and was looking to organize sports programming for in many sort of like isolated communities that didn't really have strong football programming, and to also find a structured way of sort of giving back, because everybody goes to him, oh, we want a football, he gives them, oh, we want to give us money for a tournament, and so he was looking for a structured way of doing it, and so he needed some people to volunteer to organize those things. And the other thing that Kalusha was passionate about at the time, this was around 2004, was around addressing the HIV/AIDS pandemic. So how do you engage young people, especially sports people and football people, to understand what's going on with the HIV pandemic and how to prevent it, and how to address stigma, and how to also just keep communities together and all of that. So he had that keen interest in that combination of football programming and delivery, as well as the HIV/AIDS awareness. So it was more of those, that development intention. So for me, that is what was really interesting. And of course, who wouldn't want to work with one of the biggest superheroes in the country?
Yes.
So at the time, it was mainly just having an opportunity to volunteer doing those things. So so then we were having this, so we were running tournaments, setting up community leagues, under 10, under 12, under 14, distributing sports equipment, running tournaments in Chibolia, Misisi, John Leng, and everywhere around the city, and also providing coaching, coaches training for both community coaches and even some of the coaches who are working in the Premier League clubs now, because we had a partnership with the KNVB and support through different institutions that Kalusha worked with, from Nike or from the FIFA Foundation, and several other partners. So being able to provide that capacity development for grassroots coaches to get credentialed that they can even work in any football institution and be recognized. So that was really part of the model, was to provide that service, and some of the coaches from the bigger clubs would pay to attend the coaching services, and then for the community groups that we worked with from the townships, they would come for free so that they would get their credentials and can then do the service and have a career opportunity in football. So my starting out in sports work actually is from football.
Okay. Wow.
so organizing and all of that. So because my studies at UNZA was in development studies, which is about addressing issues around poverty, issues around socioeconomic challenges that communities face. So for me, that connection between providing a service like football and that being a pathway for livelihoods, being a pathway for accessing health information, and just that communities that felt isolated and separated from the rest of society, like in Chivolia, to get them to also receive that kind of service at a level that they haven't before. For me, those were development achievements that I was really interested in being a part of. So that's how I came into sport, more from the development side of things than from the high performance route.
All right, then how did you find yourself at NOWSPAR?
So that was around 2007. At that time, we had what was known as the International Kicking AIDS Out Network. And because with the Kalusha Foundation, we were doing work that involved HIV/AIDS, we were looking to be part of networks and other coalitions and to collaborate with others who are doing similar work. At that time, there were already organizations doing that kind of work, like Aegis Sports, Sport in Action, and several others, a couple of others, not too many, and some of them were outside the country. So there was this network, and Miss Matilda Mwaba was chair of that network. And also she was very, she was very prominent in promoting the use of sport to address HIV/AIDS, use of sport for the different, at the time I think they were called Millennium Development Goals. So through looking for those partnerships is how I met her. And so we sort of just got along and struck a good friendship and mutual respect for what we were each able to do. And so she shared with me the idea of she's wanting to set up an organization to focus on women and girls. So even while I was still working at the Kalusha Foundation, I was part of NOWSPAR and supporting the that idea and pulling people together to get the organizational work work going. So around 2000, end of 2008, so then I thought it would be good for my career and for my interests to focus on more on addressing gender issues and focus on getting more attention towards women and sport. And multiple sports, because we deal with all sports as opposed to just dealing with football. So that was my move to now be full-time at NOWSPAR from around 2008.
So you ditched the Kalusha Bwala Foundation and joined NOWSPAR? I
wouldn't say ditched because it was a transition and then moved to look at what we have been able to achieve with the Kalusha Foundation, and also to think about where else would I be influential, where else would I be able to use my skills and my expertise, and also develop my own presence, because that's something that I'm very passionate about, being able to affect all sports and not just football. And also at the time we were beginning to almost sort of close out some of the activities at the foundation, and several of us were taking different career paths. So I wouldn't say ditched, I would say transitioned.
Okay. So how close were you with Matilda Mwaba?
I think we were pretty close, professionally and personally. We spent a lot of time together, and a lot of time that we spent was obviously figuring out, strategizing how are we going to get the organization up and running and sustainable. So that requires a lot of time planning, a lot of time trying to figure out who you should talk to, who you should engage.
And I can see that's you and the late Matilda.
Oh yeah, there we are. So actually that was at the wedding that was 2018. At the wedding of Miss Mofu Kandondo to Mr. Mbita. She's our program manager. Okay. At NOWSPAR, so she was getting married. So that was the year.
Interesting. And that one?
I don't remember when that is, but I don't remember when that is, but yeah. So we spent a lot of time together. You can imagine, I mean, if we have to plan everything from, okay, how are we going to get our membership? How are we going to strategize regarding resources? So we spent a lot of time together in terms of doing work, but also just even in our personal lives. Should attend my family things, or attend her family things, or stay over at her house. She knew my parents knew her. Yeah, we were over there. We were in either Zimbabwe, Lesotho maybe, I think. That must have been in Lesotho, yeah. So that's with Miss Anna Muguni, who was the CEO at the NOC in Zimbabwe, and Miss Miriam Moyo, who was not only President Zambia NOC, but also she's in part of the Commonwealth Games Federation, and of course Miss Matilda Mwaba. So that was in Lesotho, and part of our intention there was to, there was a convening of the Association of National Olympic Committees of Africa, ANOCA, together with the African Union Sports Council Region 5 and the Commonwealth Games Federation Africa office. So the idea there was to get these three institutions to sort of commit to the target around addressing gender inequality and to women and girls. And so from there came the sort of the Lesotho Declaration, the Maputo Declaration, the Lesotho Declaration, and so the member states of the AUSC 5 made commitments. And actually right now they are revising their gender equity plan, and that's something that's going to be sort of adopted in the next few months to carry over some of those interests around what priority areas. So some of the work that we did with Matilda was to go around to different meetings with the intention of influencing the outcomes of those meetings. So you'd be invited to make presentations, you'd be invited to sort of advise. Some things you'd have to do like openly and make presentations. Other things you just have like background meetings or send submissions and things like that. So we did spend a lot of time together doing that. So imagine you're like traveling together, staying in the same hotel, and sometimes you'd even share accommodation. So we were pretty close. Yeah.
All right. So when that organization was being set up, what was the idea behind it? And you started as a trustee, while Matilda started as an executive director.
So how NOWSPAR started is several trustees that you need to be in place for the governance setup. So I started out in programming actually. So the first few months I was responsible for programming, and then after a couple of months, then I got added on as a trustee. So she was not only executive director, she was also one of the trustees. And so we had about 6 trustees, and the trustees are sort of permanent founding members who are the ultimate people responsible for the institution. And then we've got a board which is comprised of the trustees together with other members. So there's about 11 board members, and then you've got the management who are staff. So her being executive director did not take away from her being trustee, and at the time I was secretary general, which also did not take away from me being a trustee. So even before I was trustee, I was still involved with like the programming and the organizing. Remember, I was working at the Kalusha Foundation, and then I was volunteering at NOWSPAR because it was just starting out and didn't have the resources yet to have full-time staff like we have now. So several people were involved with the setup. We had Miss Matilda Mwaba, we had Miss Matilda Mwaba. She also passed, and she was our first chairperson. She was working at the Curriculum Development Center in the Ministry of Education. Her specialism was curriculums and in education systems. We also had people like Mr. David Kailo, who was working with procurement and at the tender board, but he came from judo, so he was very strong in the sports area. We had Mr. Muitwa, who also came from the judo setup. So they were, yes. Oh, unfortunately, several people have passed away. We have had many losses. It's been quite tragic. So there's several people who have passed away who were at the start supporting the establishment of NOWSPAR. And I mention all of this to help people understand what it takes to set up an organization. Because the first thing that we had to overcome was even getting the idea accepted that we do need an organization like this in Zambia. Because then we were facing resistance of, there are so many sports associations, why don't you just have women's desks in each of those associations? Why do you going to need an entire organization just focusing on women in sport? So making the relevant stakeholders understand that when you have an issue like gender inequality that particularly affects women, it does become important to set up a mechanism specifically to address the issue. If you have issues, for example, like challenges with education for children, or education for girls, there is organizations specifically dealing with that. FAWEZA was set up to do that. CAMFED was set up to do that. And you've got institutions that are dealing with whatever it is, disabilities, whatever area of marginalization. As a strategy, it has been known and accepted that setting up an institution which can then garner resources and attention and focus on the issue is an important intervention. But of course, there are political reasons why people would not want that to happen. Because if, for example, resources within the sports sector are drawn from very few stakeholders who provide financing, of course it's going to look like you're trying to put up competition and divert resources. And for others, it's going to be, they were making cases like, are you making us look like Zambia is not taking action on this? Why do you need an entire institution on it? So even challenging that political sort of resistance. So that took a bit of time to even get our formal registration. So even though our formal registration is from 2007, the work actually, the organizing, the coming together, trying to get things to happen was from way before. So if you recall, the Beijing conference happened way before. And from there already, there was activity trying to set up and to mobilize. So before we had NOWSPAR, we had an attempt at setting up a form of NOWSPAR that was called ZAWISA. And that was because around 1998, just after the 1995 Beijing, there was the World Conference on Women and Sport, which was held in Namibia. And that set up a continent-wide Africa Women in Sport Association, AWISA. So after that, everybody went back to their countries, starting with Miss Matilda and several others, and said, in Zambia, we're going to put together an association for women in sport. But that didn't progress because there was no support, the momentum didn't carry through. And also, there was a lot going on, I think, around the late 90s, also politically. And even just the space to do that, the resources, there's nobody who would be interested in that sort of thing. So there's also something about the timing of it. So by the time it's getting 2005, 2007, we're discussing the Millennium Development Goals. We've had institutions focusing on women like FAWEZA, NGOCC, Women for Change, and all of this. So it's not strange in Zambia to have women's organizations or associations. Okay. And therefore, even when we show up at the Registrar of Societies or anybody else, it's not very strange. Of course, they think it's strange of, oh, sport, okay, that's interesting, but they're not against it because we're saying, look, it is in the human rights provisions that everybody has a right to sport. It is in the human rights provisions that you can, you have to remove and eliminate all forms of discrimination and marginalization against anybody based on sex, okay, whether it's recreation or labor or employment or any other thing. So then it became possible to set up the organization with a momentum that got us to where we are currently.
Okay, so from the time the organization was set up, tell us some of the interventions that you put in as NOWSPAR to change things that up to now, those things women in sport are appreciating. What are some of those things? Major things.
In 2008-9, we're just setting up, and we're writing our proposals and trying to look for financing and trying to look for resources and trying to structure our programming. One of the first things that we said, okay, we need data, we need information to find out what's going on, and so we do a survey to figure out what are the issues that women in sport face. What are the challenges that sports organizations face that hinder girls and women to get involved in sport? And so we are hearing things like, no, there's no equipment, sports activities are not conducted for girls and women, they're only for boys. And then we start to hear things about, no, we're scared girls can get pregnant, no, girls can get abused. And we're like, wait a minute, hold on, that's new. And that's something quite difficult to deal with. So we start to hear about these things. And so the first thing that we are thinking is, okay, here we are interested in getting more girls and women involved in sport. But if what we're hearing is sport is unsafe, then is it really ethical that we should be campaigning to get more women and girls involved in sport? So that actually was a challenge for us. And so what we did then was to say, okay, if this is the situation, then we need to talk about it. We need to engage the sports community, we need to engage the media, we need to engage everybody involved and say, look, this is what we're finding, what shall we do about it? So from around 2009-10, we start to engage on the topic of gender-based violence in sport and to educate the sports associations, the people who are governing sport, media people, we're talking to them about it. We start participating in the 16 days campaign against gender-based violence. And also, we managed to get the resources and the expertise to undertake another study that now provides the better insights and evidence of what the nature of this gender-based violence is. It's harassment, it's abuse, it's bullying, it's sexual exploitation, it's all sorts of things. And it's happening to both girls and boys, it's happening to men, it's happening to women. And so it gives us this really complex picture of what is going on and therefore what we can do about it. And some of our interventions have been supporting sports organizations, first of all, to get the education they need to understand the topic, and secondly, support them with getting their policies in place, because then the governors of sport are responsible for ensuring the safeguarding and protection of the athletes. So we start to deal with this as an integrity issue. And we speak to sports stakeholders and say, look, you have to take action. Here is what you can do. Because we did discover that some of them were interested in doing something, but they didn't quite know what to do. And there was this resistance, thinking if they engage with us on the topic, it means they are admitting that they have harassment and abuse going on in their sports association, or that they themselves are perpetrators. So that was really, really challenging. But what we managed to achieve is to get sports organizations to understand that it's part of what it takes to have good quality sport, if sport is safe, if sport has safeguarding and protection measures. Okay. And I think so that was really important. Have women been coming to confide in you that, no, look, this is what happened, or maybe I was sidelined, or maybe I was abused, or something like that? Do things like that happen in Zambian sports? So some of what we have done is to provide opportunities for women and girls to have the space that they can have these discussions and conversations. And some of them are going to come to us with the intention of seeking support. Or some of them are coming to learn and to understand, what should I do? So for example, we have a network for women who are in sports coaching. And these are coaches from various sports disciplines. And part of our support to them is what are the issues that you encounter? How do you deal with them? So some of them are going to share with us that one of the challenges, and they have been sharing this, some of the challenges that they encounter are of an abusive nature, can count as harassment. How can they navigate it? Because they do not want to leave sport, but how can they better navigate it, and where can they seek support for that? So we do have those sorts of demands on our expertise and our attention. Other also requests that come in as sports organizations requesting us to support them to develop their policies, to train their new leaders when they've had elections, to train their coaches, to train their, educate their athletes. And in some cases, we've also had to engage with some of the parents of some of the athletes and participants. So our work as a sports organization is to support the entire sports ecosystem so that they can deliver better for girls and women, so they can be involved in all forms of sport, and not just as athletes, as coaches, administrators, medical people, whatever format of involvement. Remember when we were talking about my own involvement, I was not able to be an athlete, but I was able to participate in the group planning and organizing. So we have to be able to see sport as a space where there's opportunities for women of all capacities and interests to be involved. But that has to be safe. It shouldn't be a risk to your well-being or a risk to you and your resources to be involved in sport. And that is something that we're very proud of, that we have managed to get the sports sector to take it seriously. And so it's something that is often a requirement in terms of codes of ethics, codes of conduct. And also in the sport for development space, the work that we have done has been well appreciated, and almost all the sports for development organizations we engage with have their policies developed. They have entire programs specifically targeting women and girls, and also the programs they started, which were for everybody. They're now being very deliberate to make sure there are no barriers for girls and women to be involved. And also they are addressing and having programs specifically around safeguarding and protection. So that is some of the influence that we have had. And we continue to push these education programs. Just a few weeks ago, we had a webinar for sports persons and for media persons to understand the topic around what are the risks and safeguarding issues that emerge from sex testing of high performance athletes.
Contentious topic.
Yes, contentious, but it can be contentious to some, but for us, this is an issue of safeguarding and protection because it affects the well-being of athletes. So for us, our step number one was we need to educate people, starting with media personnel, to understand even the questions they should be asking. What are the definitions of some of these things? What are the implications for athlete well-being? What are the implications for the association and for the country and for everybody's human rights involved? So for us, we start with what are the basics that need to be taken care of. And as NOWSPAR, we are there to provide a service to the rest of the sports sector. So we are looking at what does the sector need for them to deliver equitably to girls and women, because that is what's missing.
I thought you were going to march to CAF headquarters and protest.
We are very, we're very deliberate, and we have to manage how we expend our energy. Part of what sports teaches you is you have to strategize. If I need to get the ball into the net, should I go all the way around the entire pitch? Or what is the most efficient way of doing it? Should I do it myself, or should I pass the ball to someone else? Will I be offside, or should I wait until my person who I work with is for? So part of being an advocacy organization is understanding what method and approach you will take when there's an issue. So an issue like this one, which you say is contentious, first of all, we have to understand who are we as an organization, what is our role, who else can we work with, because this is a long-term complex issue. So understanding your own capacity, understanding where you'd be most effective and where the need most is, and that is where we take action. Because we are more interested in the well-being of the athletes. We are more interested in the capacity of the sports organizations who are here to understand these issues that marginalize our athletes. We are interested in them then being prepared, and the general public also having an understanding of what is going on in the sports sector. What are the issues? Because I think we are used to hearing about marginalization issues like, oh, there's harassment and abuse, there's lack of resources, lack of fair pay.
Yes,
so
you find that men are getting
higher pay than women. So that is something that is a bit more in the public domain in terms of our understanding of how that happens and why. And people are more confident to even know what we should say about it. But when you have a conversation like you have to test athletes to determine the agenda and whether they qualify to participate in a tournament. There's a lot of questions of what does that even mean? How does the testing happen? What is supposed to happen? Or why doesn't the athlete just do 1, 2, 3? So then we need to then educate the public, educate the sports institutions, educate media practitioners like yourself, Mr. Sinkala. So that is where we would focus our resources and our energy.
Right. Okay. Now, in 2021, the organization lost the founding executive director. I'm sure that should have been very devastating. How did the organization handle it?
Yeah, it is very, very tragic. So the first thing that we were concerned about, obviously, is that the organization must continue to work. So when you lose a leader, let me remind you of what happened every time that the country has lost a president who's in office. Some of the concerns have been, how do we make sure that your government continues to operate? So do you have your staff who can continue to do the work? Are there processes that required the presence and action of the leader who has passed? And so can you make sure those processes can still be done by someone else? So our main concerns were, can we still continue to operate? The second thing that we were concerned about is the longer term operations of the organization, because Ms. Mwaba was a very big part of the organization, not only as executive director, but even the brand of the organization. I think you would say, oh, Ms. Mwaba, NOWSPAR, oh, Ms. Mwaba, you'd say the two things together. Well, up to now. And also part of what would happen is the relationships that she was managing and responsible for different stakeholders, whether it is government officials, its corporate sector, or other funding partners, as well as the sports community, because she was a big part of not just NOWSPAR. She was in the Sports Council. She had previously been in the National Olympic Committee. She was on boards of various sports associations. So she was embedded in the sports sector. So those were really important relationships for how we operate as an organization. So her passing was not just that we no longer had her as executive director, but that was a major loss in terms of our relationships with various stakeholders. So sustaining those relationships and keeping them became a major priority for us. What we were fortunate with is we had good relationships with, and they were institutionalized. We have partnerships with various organizations who provide our funding, or organizations who we collaborate with, or organizations who we are funding. So those are institutionalized and they could carry on because you've got agreements and all of that. But even they needed assurance that we know what we're doing and we have a leadership plan and somebody else who's going to continue to lead the organization and things are going to go well. The other thing we needed to do was, of course, take care of ourselves as the staff, as the volunteers, because she was not only executive director. This was somebody who was seen as a mentor to everybody in the organization. So there was also like a very, it wasn't just a professional loss, it was a personal loss for a lot of us. So one of the things that we did was to seek support. So one of our funding partners agreed to support us with the resources to seek counseling services. So we had Renaissance provide us with grief counseling. So as a group, in small groups, as well as on a one-on-one basis, and to retain them that any time one of us needed their service, you could go to them, and it's not something that comes out of your salary. It's covered by the organization. So being able to have that support was very important. And I know we are speaking a lot these days about mental health and all of that. But one thing I think that we're not talking about a lot is the vast amount of grief that we are all experiencing, even after the whole COVID situation that occurred and so many deaths that have happened. And so as an organization, recognizing that well-being and being able to move forward is not only securing our donor funding, is not only securing our relationship with the government and with the sports, or that you can still have us here at ZNBC on your programs. It was not only about that. It was also about the mental health of all the members of staff.
Okay. So how have you handled, you are now the executive director, how have you handled it the past, is it 1 year now or so? Yeah, like over a year, like a year and a half now. So part of my focus over this period has been to get a new organizational strategy in place, which we have just completed. So we're going to be focusing on a new theme. Previously, our theme was Everybody Matters, drawing attention to the idea that women and girls also matter and they should be part of sport. So now we have a new theme, which is Everybody Moves, because what we are interested in now is
all the girls and women should be able to move for physical activity, for competition, and for all of these things. We also want to see movement towards the targets that have been set in terms of the national plans, sustainable development goals. And also we should see movement from various stakeholders to directly invest into sport. We also want to see movement in terms of the types of sport that are being played and that the way that women are engaging. So it's that theme of movement that we're going to be working with now over the next 3 to 4 years. The other thing that has been a focus for me as the leader of the team has been to keep the team together and to get them re-energized and not to get sort of lose focus that the organization is and the work that we have to do that is not going to be important anymore, or we won't be able to do it because our founding leader has passed on. So it has been also the work of keeping everybody like working together to keep motivated.
Okay.
So it's not me to motivate them, but together to support each other to stay motivated to carry on with the work.
Okay, before we go, you're the holder of the PhD in sports science and physical education. Do you think you've reached the climax, or you'd want to achieve more? What's the biggest thing that you want to achieve?
I don't think there's ever an ending to this, because one thing that a PhD does is you spend many years focusing on one little thing and you go into really, really detailed. So for those years that I was doing the PhD, my focus was on leadership, organizational leadership in sports organizations in Southern Africa. And not just organizational leadership, but how women experience organizational leadership. So that's a really, really narrow focus. So there's so many other topics that I'm really interested and keen on. So I'm interested in moving the sort of learning and research activities, and also taking learning and research out of the PhD thesis, master's thesis that are sitting in libraries and in journals that are really hard to pay for anybody to access, and to move that into conversations like here on TV of, can we discuss some of the topics that are in these research journals? Can we sit with people who are in the sports associations and discuss this research with them so they can understand it? So bridging that gap from the researchers to practitioners and athletes and users of this knowledge, because these are the people we are going to and asking them to fill in questionnaires, we're interviewing them and extracting information from them. So what I'm keen about is now taking all of that back and working in such a way that the learning and research is a bit more collaborative. There's no end to reading and learning.
Okay, no, it's been a pleasure hosting you.
Thank you.
But it's a tradition for people to juggle here on this program. Pete.
I'm afraid I didn't bring my football boots, so I will pass.
I knew it. Okay, thank you very much for coming through. So I was hosting Dr. Lombe Mwamwa, who is the Executive Director of NOWSPAR, the organization which is in charge of looking at the affairs of women in sport. Until next week, when we look at a different discussion, or when I come with another guest, my name is Modern Tapechela Sinkalumwana Wapilanzi. Goodbye. Remember, I'll give you the answer to that question I asked you next week.